Hi guys, my name is Temitayo Olugbade. I am the campus director at Ladoke Akintola University of Technology. I welcome everybody to today's webinar. I am super excited to be on for today's webinar. So without further ado, quickly let me know in the chat section what your expectations are today. What are you hoping to gain from today's webinar? Of course, each webinar will always have something we'll learn and take home. So in the comment section, quickly let me know what your expectations are alongside your name, your country, and your institution. All right, today we are going to be having an important guest in our midst, in person of Sam Vaghar. He is a social entrepreneur. He's committed to helping young people own their voice and power for social impact. Sam is the executive director of Millennium Fellowship, which is with over a decade of impacts, co-founding and leading the Millennium Campus Network. So without wasting much of our time, I will bring on our guest in person of Sam Vaghar. Sam Vaghar, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you too?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's good to see you.
I guess you are thrilled to teach us and speak to us today. How do you feel about that?
You know, it's an honor, and I I'm kind of in awe every time we have a webinar like this. I would have been happy to speak to 3 of you. The fact that there's 330 of you is pretty remarkable. So I'm just grateful for your time, to each of you, and to you, Timoteo, for hosting this. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for the welcome notes. We are fascinated to hear you too because of the wealth of experience you have gathered over the years. So we would like to, hear from you, understand how your journey has been right from the day you kickstarted your passion for social impact. So quickly, would you like to share with us, what you have for us today?
Definitely. So let me I'll kick it off with the presentation. And what I'm going to share in this presentation, I know many of you were able to join the webinar last week on networking. And we heard from Raphael and we heard from Rachel and Andrew, just their insights. I wanted to do a deeper dive. And I love doing it through storytelling. So I wanted to weave together the story that I've experienced over the last 12 years with very concrete, actionable tips that might seem obvious, but I think actually are often overlooked. And then, Timoteo, I'll open it up if you have, an immediate reaction or question after I've presented, and then hopefully we can get to, as many questions as we can squeeze in. I'll try and be very concise to any of you who have a question about how to build your professional network, wherever you are in the world. Pose those questions in the chat. I know, Timoteo, you and I and Noha and others, we can track some of those questions and hopefully pick some of those to get to in this hour. So I'll do a screen share if I can. Let me see if this works. Let's see here. Great. And if this doesn't work, just let me know. Can you, okay, are you all able to see this?
Yeah, we can.
Perfect. Okay. So welcome everyone to the Millennium Fellowship. And I wanted to focus today on building your professional network, how to position yourself for career success. These are lessons that really are 12 years of experience drawn down and parsed out, just a couple of concrete lessons that I hope will help each and every one of you. Every session that I ever do and every piece of the Millennium Fellowship, we want it to add value for you. If it's not adding value, let us know, including this. If you're like, Sam, this isn't working for me, or there's something else I really want to learn about, let us know. We're here to support you. I said it in the town hall in August. We're here to be in solidarity with you so you can be in solidarity with the communities you're a part of. So MCN, we help undergraduates change the world. That's really the heart of what we do at MCN. And I wanted to share a little bit of how it began. You heard some of this in the town hall. For me, it was in part reading this article in Time magazine, How to End Poverty. There are both a host of issues I could go into around the simplification of poverty and the limitations and constraints of and issues with an article like this. At the same time, the power that comes from an article like this in mainstream media, spotlighting extreme poverty, the fact that over 700 million people live on less than $1.90 a day, at least from an American context. Unfortunately, that's often not in the news and centered. Those narratives are not centered in the ways they could or should be. And so that's been, for me at 19 years old to read that article really stood out. And so what I wanted to share with you as well, I'll just kind of briefly summarize this part, which is to say, since I shared it in the town hall, I was 19, read this article, read 2 books. I always recommend Mountains Beyond Mountains to everybody. Mountains Beyond Mountains about Dr. Paul Farmer and Partners in Health. Then I read the full book behind this article, The End of Poverty. Cold called Jeff Sachs, went down to Columbia University, started on this journey, had our first summit at MIT with 1,000 student leaders, launched Millennium Campus Network in our college dorm rooms as a platform for undergraduates making a difference. And from there, has been on this 12-year journey, helping young people own your voice and your power to make a difference in your communities. What's been, I think, most meaningful to me is really to see what young people are doing in their own communities, what you're doing to make a difference and achieve the sustainable development goals in community. And, part of that for me is spotlighting these individual projects, whether it's in Nigeria, leveraging solar power to provide electricity to community members at night. I think 106 community members provided electricity through this project. You can see that upper photo. And then student leaders in Mexico, I believe at UDEM, who are supporting local artisans. So using the principles that they're learning in the classroom around creating businesses, small businesses to support local artisans and securing sustainable livelihoods. I think it's what we sometimes miss in the aggregate and in the fact that there's 1,000+ Millennium Fellows in the class of 2020 is that there are literally hundreds of stories of impact and of solidarity and community. And so just kind of lifting up some of those stories, I think, is really important. And I would encourage you in the chat box during this hour and beyond, if there's a project that you think or a lesson learned that you think others can draw from the experiences that you're having as Millennium Fellows, share that right in the chat so that others can be watching and reading along as I'm presenting. So this was really kind of the origin of MCN was, at first global summits, then global campaigns. You saw the winners of the Millennium Oceans Prize at the town hall in August. And then the Millennium Fellowship launched 7 years ago we launched with 11 fellows, 15 applicants. We could barely get 15 people to apply. So if you ever feel like, hey, the projects and things I care about are great, but it's so small scale, does it really matter? It absolutely does for the people that you're working with. And it's so important to create tight feedback loops with the community members you engage. And that's really what we committed to doing. When we first ran the Millennium Fellowship, we had these 11 fellows just here in Boston. I'm in Boston now. And we said, look, let's make sure that we're really listening to and learning from what young people are saying that they want, what's going to best support them on their journey. And so we started with 11 fellows, and obviously now each year we have over 1,000 of you. And that was a kind of gentle incremental progression. And along this journey, there have been leaders like Carissa Shaw, who at the time was in her first year at the University of Pennsylvania. She created Cyber Sensibility as a platform, tackling cyberbullying. And so she noted that, a lot of kids are dealing with this issue, created a digital curriculum to support young people in elementary and middle school, was serving about 600 people in elementary and middle school. And then through the Millennium Fellowship, just leveraging the network, actually built out an ambassador program in India and expanded this program from Penn to communities in India. So that's a concrete example of someone actually leveraging the community, just finding peers. I mean, literally, like, the power is not in me speaking. It's in the fact that there's 300 plus of you here and 1,000 plus in the class of 2020, just kind of reaching out. And what we're really excited about, know-how we'll share in the coming days, we're very shortly going to share the full database with you all, so that you'll be able to search each other's projects around the world and connect with each other, and make that really easy for you to be able to do. Philemon Kuza at the University of Ibadan created the Open Campus Initiative. You might be wondering, in a world of COVID-19, when a lot of face-to-face interaction might be limited or non-existent for your projects, well, what can I do? How can I pivot and adapt my project to add real value? Philemon identified this challenge that so many students are producing papers. You're writing a thesis, a research paper. Maybe if it's really good, it ends up in the campus library, but then it's just in hard copy form and no one else ever reads it. They don't have access to it. And so Philemon created the Open Campus Initiative to actually take the content that students are creating, the research, put it in digital format so it can be searched and drawn upon by others on campus, and then work to start to actually scale this model across Nigeria. So that's one example that I was thinking of. Just, I know with COVID-19, a lot of you are wondering, well, what can I do that's still relevant in a digital world? And that's a good example. And I would encourage you, reach out to Philemon, because he was doing this work, even 2 years prior to today. And in terms of our impact, we've had over 6,000 alums come through our program. 75% of our alumni are now in careers with social impact. And that's important to note when we say careers with social impact or social impact careers. That's not limited to people working with nonprofits. That's leaders who are working in nonprofits, in B corporations, in governments, in CSR departments, or on supply chains focused on sustainability. There are a lot of different ways to build a career with social impact. And so part of our goal, particularly with these webinars, is to expose you to a myriad of pathways to a social impact career, some of which you may be very familiar with, but some of them you may never have heard of before. Leaders who have very unique roles in corporate philanthropy or in impact investing, socially responsible investing, spaces that you just may not have explored before. And we want to make those closer to you, bring you into proximity with a lot of different fields. And just this last year, I mean, you can see the numbers from last year: 805 Millennium Fellows, 422 unique projects, almost 100,000 hours contributed to these projects, more than 500,000 lives positively impacted. You're part of a movement. And I just wanted to share that context, because if you feel like, well, how does this matter, right? I myself am a grad student this year, so I know what it's like to have classes, and you might have work study and jobs and family commitments and other commitments, and you're doing a Millennium Fellowship project, and some of you are campus directors as well. We understand that, but I want you to just take heart in knowing that there are 1,000 other young leaders who are in some senses sharing a part of that narrative, a piece of that narrative with you. So here's where I really want to drill down. And over these next 15, 20 minutes, I want to give you some actionable advice that you can take with you in the careers that you're going to build and in the projects that you're leading this semester. So this piece of advice, never be afraid to talk to anyone. I want to share where it comes from. I want to share the constraints of the advice, but I want to make sure that this is front of mind for all of you. So never be afraid to talk to anyone. Where this advice comes from, I was 18 years old, and I had read these two books, Mountains Beyond Mountains, The End of Poverty, shortly thereafter. But in this moment, I was actually in Washington, D.C. in the bitter cold, January 2005. We're in an election cycle here in the United States, and we had just elected a president, President Bush, in January 2005 was inauguration. I was there, and all I heard was political division. I heard people yelling at each other. And at a certain point, I just wanted to disconnect from people yelling at each other and really find humanity, find connection. And so I came across a man who is homeless. And instead of walking by him or pretending he didn't exist or so many other things that honestly in my past I had done and I'd seen other people do, I sat down with this man and we shared lunch. And about 20 minutes into the conversation, I asked this man, I said, "How do you survive?" And he looked back at me and he said, "I'm not afraid to talk to anyone. I'm not afraid to look up at those above me and ask for help. Never be afraid to talk to anyone. Never be afraid to talk to anyone." And that was probably the best advice that I've received. I'm 34 now, in 34 years of life. It didn't come from a world leader. It didn't come from a professor. It didn't come from my own family. It came from a man who's homeless, who society would have taught me is less than, is less valuable, is a drain on society, couldn't possibly offer me anything. And yet he gave me the best affirmation and advice I could ever get in my life. Never be afraid to talk to anyone. Now, putting this advice into practice is easier said than done. I don't think it's necessarily always the case. There are definitely times I'm scared. When I have to go and make a pitch and ask for funding for our work, when I want to reach out to somebody who's in a very high profile role and I'm not sure what they're going to say, when I need to ask a friend for help on something, even somebody close to me, sometimes I'm afraid. So I want to put this advice in context. I'm not saying you're not going to be afraid sometimes, and that's understandable. But the advice here is really to find the space to be courageous, particularly for the causes that are closest to your heart. And I say that because, if we're really going to be in solidarity with people and communities, then we need to live courageously. And so this advice really stuck with me, and it changed me because I was a shy kid growing up. I had 2 friends growing up in high school. I really didn't fit in. I was on the outside looking in most of the time. For any of you who might be introverts, I'm naturally an introvert. And at this point in my life growing up, I most days at the cafeteria, I actually went home and I ate food many days on my own because I didn't have anyone to sit with. And I had, I think, 1 date all 4 years of high school. And that was like a blind date where my friend set me up because I was too shy to ask the girl that I liked. I'm not just sharing this to kind of, I'm mainly sharing this because I want you to understand that me speaking to hundreds of you today was the same person who was shy growing up. But it was taking advice like this and actually trying to live it in different moments and facets of my life that enabled me to find my voice and my power. And so I took this piece of advice, and when I was in Miami in 2010, I saw an actor named Cal Penn, and we were at a conference some of you may know called Clinton Global Initiative University, and many other young people were there as well, and they saw this actor Cal Penn, and they were honestly too shy to go say hi. He was standing right in front of the stage. He He's mainly known for, I think he was in House or Grey's Anatomy. He was in The Namesake. He was also in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, though it's not my favorite reference point, but maybe the most well-known. But I saw Cal standing there, and I knew, I had just started MCN. We were about a year and a half into the journey, and I saw him. And as scared as I was, I thought back to this moment: never be afraid to talk to anyone, make the most of every opportunity. And so I reached out to Cal, and I reached out my hand, and I said, Cal, I'm Sam Vaghar from Boston. I head Millennium Campus Network. We're a platform for undergraduates making a difference. And Cal had actually left. He had left Hollywood to work for a little bit for President Obama in the White House on global youth engagement. And so Cal said, yeah, Sam, this sounds great. Let's connect further. And a key lesson that I want to share here is when somebody says this is of interest, say, ask them, and this is very specific language that I wanted to give you. Ask them, what is the best way to follow up with you? What is the best way to follow up with you? Or, can I get your card? Can I get your contact information? And if you have a card, beautiful. If you don't have cards yet, but you have the ability to print your own cards, even if it just says, Millennium Fellow or student or whatever it can say on it, I would highly encourage you to do that, because so often what I found was, and if you have a card and you just hand your contact information to somebody and you say, hey, I'd love to connect further, the likelihood that they're going to follow up is 1,000,000 to 1. Somebody like Cal Penn, or somebody in a position of authority that or a position of power, whether it's in philanthropy or business or at your university, whatever it might be, they connect with hundreds or thousands of people every week. And so it's so important, have that elevator pitch ready in a sentence or two. Here's what I do. If they have interest in learning more, and if you build rapport, then exactly what I did was I said, hey, I'd love to connect. I actually held out my card and I said, can I have your card? And Cal was like, yes. As far as I can remember the story, he was like, yes, let's connect further. And so we exchanged cards, and he said, Sam, if you want to come to the White House and share a little bit more about what you're doing, I'd love to connect further. And I immediately made plans to be in Washington, D.C. I didn't have plans prior, but I made a note to myself. I was like, look, if I'm going to have the opportunity to go connect further with Cal, I got to make the most of it. So within a week or two, I said, okay, I'm planning out a flight. I don't have that planned, but I'll do that. I went, met with Cal, and a key thing that happened in the lead up to that was, when you connect with somebody, if they give you your contact and their contact information, especially when we do webinars, you're going to find that a lot of times in the webinars, the speakers will actually put their contact information in the chat box. Or if you're on campus and there's a guest speaker in your class, they'll put maybe they'll give you their card, or if it's virtual, they'll put their contact information in the chat box, or you're going to email with it. I cannot emphasize this enough. Follow up with that individual within 24 hours. That will pay such dividends. And I know this sounds so obvious, but so few people do it. When you actually get somebody's contact information, particularly, let's say during the class, you ask a question, they say, great question, you have that little moment of connection. If you wait a week or 2 weeks or a month to follow up and say, hey, remember me, we had a great session, they won't remember you. Like we have in these moments when we're connecting, and as soon as I'm done with this PowerPoint, I'm going to read the chat box, I'm going to read all your comments. You have these moments of connection, but they're like magic in that moment. To really harness them, you've got to follow up and build that feedback loop right away. So if you get somebody's contact information, if you ask for it and say, I'd love to follow up, what's the best way to follow up? Can I have your card? Can I have your contact information? The moment that you get it, to follow up within 24 hours. And usually the follow-up can be very short. I'm talking 4 or 5 sentences, very short email. Nobody needs 5 paragraphs. 5 sentences can suffice. A short email that basically sums up, here's what I want to affirm and what you shared with me. Here's the advice that actually meant something to me and my journey. And here's what I'm working on in a sentence. And then here's what I'd love to connect on. I'd love to have 30 minutes with you in the next month to connect on this specific topic. And so that's what I did. And I followed up with Cal. I said, here's what you shared that affirmed with me. Here's what I'm doing with MCN. And I would love to connect with you in Washington, D.C. to share more. 2 weeks later, I was in D.C., meeting with his team, with a colleague of his, sharing what we were working on. And then for the subsequent 10 months after that, I learned this advice from Ron Cordes of the Cordes Foundation, he taught me, these are the 5 magic words you can ask in any business meeting, in any meeting period, that really equalize the relationship. How can I help you? And the reason this question is so powerful and profound in any meeting is by asking, how can I help you? You equalize the relationship. Because what you're saying is, both you have dignity and power and worth and things to offer the other person, and so do they. So often as a young person, we come into a conversation or a dialogue and we say, I need something, right? I need an internship, or I need a job, or I need funding for my venture, or I need media coverage, or I need volunteer, whatever it is that you need. It's all about your needs. But keep in mind, that person that you're engaging, whether it's a professor, a social entrepreneur, a business leader, a government leader, whoever they are, they have their own agenda and aspirations. So it's so important to name that up front. And you can actually do that very simply by offering this question, how can I help you? You can rephrase that for local context. I know every community is different and you're in 20 countries around the world, but I would simply offer to you that, how can I help you? Asking that simple question. What that does is it really says, hey, maybe there's something I can offer you. And you never know, maybe it's they need connections to young voices, or they want to survey young people, or they want a focus group of young people. Well, that's something you might uniquely be positioned to offer to a global leader. So always thinking, keeping in the back of your mind, how can I help you? And they'll be flattered and honored that you even thought of them. And it also signifies that maybe there are things you can bring to the table for them as well. And I know that's something Rachel shared last week, but I wanted to reiterate that point because it's a really important one. And so that's what I did. With Cal Penn, I reached out every couple months and I said, hey, how can I help you? And Cal said, well, look, we're good. We're at the White House. We've kind of got it figured out. Like, that was the sense I got, right? Is they're in a leadership role. I mean, this is the Obama administration. They're leading on so many initiatives. And yet after about 10 months, because I kept reaching out, Cal sent out an email and he said, we want to do these White House youth roundtables. We want to know what young Americans care about. And so about, 10 months in, he asked this question. I immediately responded. I said, well, look, we as a community will organize and we'll figure out, what is our community thinking our priorities. So we organized roundtables, frankly, in groups much smaller than this. So it was usually groups of 10 or 20 students on each campus, kind of like each of your cohorts on each campus. We did this all over the US with our community and just asked, what do we care about with respect to global development? What are the issues, the priorities, the challenges? And so 3 weeks later, Cal called me back and he said, Sam, do you want to come to a debrief meeting at the White House and share, what you learned from these roundtables? And I said, well, to be honest, Cal, we're pretty busy. I don't think we have time. But actually, this is what emerged instead. I'm kidding. Obviously, you can never pass up opportunities. Be ready for every opportunity. And so in this singular moment, what ended up happening was went to the White House, met with President Obama. It's a much longer story, but in the interest of time, I'll skip the details. I'll just share it was pretty special to be in this moment with the president, and to have the opportunity to sit right across. You can see we were in the Roosevelt Room in the White House, sitting right across from President Obama. There was 10 national youth leaders there sharing our respective projects and passions and causes. And one of the lessons I learned from this experience is know what you want out of every meeting. Your time as a Millennium Fellow, as a student leader, is infinitely valuable. Your time is infinitely valuable. And it is so important that every moment that you're spending, of course, you can have time to decompress and watch reality TV or do things that are fun for you. But it's also really important to note that this is a really special time in your life for your self-exploration, finding your identity, your political identity, your social identity, what you're going to do with your life. And so, especially in professional context and academic context, know what you want out of every meeting, right? Even connecting on this webinar, are there certain lessons or questions you want to make sure you get answers to? Let's do that. Let's have that conversation in this hour. Or are there things you want to connect with MCN or United Nations Academic Impact on? Let us know. Or do you really want to connect with me on something specific where I can be helpful in writing you a letter of recommendation or being a reference? Name those things, know those things for yourself. And then, yes, never be afraid to talk to anyone and ask for what you need. And so that's what we did in this meeting. So when I shook hands with President Obama, I said, I'm Sam Vaghar from Boston. And I pulled out a couple of notes and I said, these are for you and the First Lady to get involved in the work we're doing. And the president looked down at me shocked. And Secret Service probably hated me for doing this, but I didn't care because in this moment, never be afraid to talk to anyone and know what you want out of every meeting. And so the president talked to us for about 10, 15 minutes about the power of young people, about why it's so important to make a difference when you're young, not to wait until you're 80 or 90 to give back, but to do this at every stage of your life. And at the end of this, I raised my hand and I said, look, the president said, yes, Sam, go ahead. And I said, look, first of all, your leadership to me is a bold statement because, and I'm a little bit obviously older than many of you. If you had told me when I was 10 years old that somebody named Barack Hussein Obama would be elected president of the United States, I wouldn't have believed it. I don't think, honestly, many people would at that time. And so I said, your leadership is a bold statement, regardless of people's politics. And I said, look, here's an invitation. What those letters are, and you can see in that photo, actually he's holding the letters. I said, those are an invitation for you and the First Lady to get involved in the work we're doing at MCN. Everyone in the room laughed at me because I was pitching the president in front of everybody. And, the president said, thank you. And as soon as I had put my hand down, every other hand shot up. Everyone else had a question to ask or some ask. A key lesson that I wanted to impart here is it is so hard to go first. I think you all know this intuitively, but I want to name it. It is so hard to be first at something. When you see an injustice in your community or when you're trying to advocate for a cause or an organization or your venture, it is so hard to be the first one to raise your hand because it might seem out of place. But what I want to offer is even in these moments in a platform like this, it's exactly what I did. And what emerged from that was a month later, the State Department called and they said, Sam, do you want to share your work with youth and educators in Bosnia and Herzegovina? So we traveled all across the country, 6 cities, 7 days in 2011 in Bosnia and Herzegovina, then in Morocco, 6 cities and I think 8 days in Morocco in 2013, then Bulgaria and North Macedonia in 2015. All of these things that emerged out of that. Culminating in a global summit we did in Morocco in 2017. All of that happened because in that moment with President Obama, we had a willingness to reach out and I had a willingness to raise my hand and just advocate for what I believed in and know what I want out of the meeting, not know if that would actually manifest, but know that I'd be willing to try. And that happened in large part because when I was 18 years old, this man who was homeless taught me never be afraid to talk to anyone. Never be afraid to talk to anyone. And throughout that journey, always ask, how can I help you? Don't make the story just about you or your organization, but realize, particularly it's very clear and evident to me looking at all of you from around the world, realize that there are literally hundreds, thousands, likely millions of young people and people all across the planet who share your conviction and passion. And particularly in your communities, it might feel lonely at times. It might feel like you're the only one. But I just want to hold the fact that there are a lot of other people who share that connection, commitment, and passion. And so that was a key lesson that I learned in this journey, and I wanted to offer it to all of you. Never be afraid to talk to anyone. Always ask, how can I help you? and know what you want out of every meeting. And, you know, I would just confess that at 34, and as somebody running a nonprofit, and as someone who's now a grad student, and as someone who's advising the head of UN Women and her team on youth engagement, at the end of the day, at the same time, my story is very much unfinished. And I have so many biases and blind spots and things I don't know. So don't look to any leader who's going to come on any of these webinars or in your classes as the person, the holder of all knowledge. Nobody knows it all. Everybody is flawed and imperfect. That's what makes us human. But I think we all do have lessons and stories that are worth telling and sharing and learning from. So I wanted to share a piece of mine and give you just kind of little bits. I'm happy to, you know, set up one-on-ones to go deeper with anyone who wants to, but I wanted to share this at the outset. I'll pause here. I'll stop. I will stop the sharing, and I'll come back to, and I'm seeing, wow, the chat is absolutely packed. But Timotheo, I'll come back to you. Is there, you know, something that a reaction you have or a follow-up question? Maybe we'll start there and then dive into the chat box.
Wow. I am impressed. That was a great presentation. Fantastic. I really learned so much. It's an honor to be in this webinar. All right. I have one question that I feel that all the fellows will benefit from it, because these are one of the questions that we can't do away with, we can't shy away from it. The question is this: how do we cope with rejections? You know, if we have, you know, ideas we are willing to share with someone who is not willing to agree with what we are saying. So how do we cope with that? How do we deal with that, you know, experience?
I want to answer that really succinctly, one with a story and one with advice. The story is, when we were starting MCN, you know, we're structured as a nonprofit. You know, the Millennium Fellowship, so you all understand, like, it's a partnership with MCN and United Nations Academic Impact. We team up to present this program to undergrads worldwide. But when we started, we were in our college dorm rooms, in our university dorm rooms. We needed funding. You know, funding is important, and it's important to name that. And we had none. I think we raised, even in that whole entire first year, maybe, I think if we were really lucky, we raised like $5,000 US. But it's very hard in the US context to sustain, to build staff, to run programs with $5,000. And I'll never forget, we went to the United Nations in the very beginning. And we said, look, we would love to build a student network for UN goals. At the time, it was the Millennium Development Goals. Now it's the Sustainable Development Goals. And the United Nations, the colleagues that we spoke to, said to me, no. They said, no, Sam, no, we're not interested. We get pitched all the time by young people. It's not that unique. I came back to them a second time. I asked again. They said no. They rejected us twice. I went back a third time. They rejected us a third time. They said no. I'll never forget. We then did our first summit at MIT. We had 1,000 student leaders show up. We didn't have a big budget to do it, but we came back a fourth time after having done that summit and sat down with Anita Sharma, who is then at the United Nations Millennium Campaign, and was hoping for $2,000 or $3,000, poured all this time into writing out a budget, being so precise, was hoping for $2,000 or $3,000. And Anita looked down at the budget, and she looked back up at me and she said, Sam, how about $20,000 to $30,000? And I said, 30,000 sounds great. And that was our seed funding. That's how we launched MCN. I share that because, and this is advice people have given me that I'm just passing on to all of you. No is not always a permanent no. No might mean no in this time, in this moment. But oftentimes it might mean it's not the right time or place for them. Sometimes, and you'll know this in your heart, sometimes it's not worth trying again, right? If the person's just like, no, and this is a terrible idea, never talk to me again, click, okay, then that's not the person for you. But sometimes it's, yeah, look, I'm funding this or that, or I'm doing 20 other things right now. It's just, I'm in a busy place in my life. Keep them updated. And so my advice is, look to build relationship with people. So update your potential supporters, your volunteers, your classmates, your professors, your administration, local media. Keep them updated, even if it's like a quarterly newsletter or once a semester email that's like very succinct but punchy with great content, just to let them know here's the progress that we're making. Because it's a lot easier when people know your story and come to know you on a personal level to then ask for support. And just know that, and this is hard for me, I struggle with this a lot. Like I take this as a founder, like as a co-founder, I take the work personally, but know that sometimes it's not about you. Like it's not about you being a failure. Like rejection is part of the journey. And I can tell you, it's great to spotlight a story like meeting with President Obama, et cetera. But underneath all that was a bunch of times and people have ignored my emails or said no to me. And sometimes, like I'm sure some of you will email me after this and you won't hear back. Try me 2 or 3 times. It's literally not personal. It's just people get busy. All of us, including all of you in your lives, get busy. And so, yeah, I would just offer that. I don't have a complete answer. I'm still working through it myself, and I appreciate the question. Why don't we jump into some of these questions in the chat and try and answer? I know there's a lot. I mean, wow. Are there any that jump out at you that you think I should try and answer?
I think we have one question here. There are numerous questions here, but I think let me pick one out of them. Natasha, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Hello.
Okay.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay.
Hello, Samsa. This is Natasha Karanji. I'm from Amity University, Mumbai. And my question to you is that, just a minute. Sir, how can we encourage the young people like to participate in our events, which we are holding globally? Because we are seeing that there's a lot of less participation. So how can we do that? And is there any right way to encourage the leaders and the members here participate in our global events?
Yeah, it's a great question, Natasha, and thanks for your leadership. I think I'll put this one very simply, which is in terms of participating in global events, one, make sure that any event, and this is general advice, make sure any event that you're going to do is adding tremendous value. Like I hope that each of you from this hour today is taking something concrete away, whether it's one of those pieces of advice or something else, because otherwise it wasn't worth it. And so I want to make sure that everyone is kind of invited in to get something concrete out as much as possible. And then 2 is get creative, right? So participating in global events, think out of the box. For an example, we do a webinar series. There's 375 people on. So clearly, like we're not having a challenge of getting people to show up. But what would it look like for you to propose to us doing a webinar together? So we're helping you invite the entire class to a webinar that you're helping to curate. Like we're open, you know what I mean? We obviously have our own structure and we've got a bunch of speakers lined up, but we could always try and get creative and think out of the box of trying to do one extra one with you, right? And so that's something like thinking whether it's with us or whether it's with a local UN office or whether it's with your university or a professor, thinking about co-branding, co-collaborative opportunities like that can help lift up, both brand and story and help kind of have an event stand out. But I also think like with every kind of webinar, with everything that you're going to do, always try and answer that question, why? Like, why do we need to do an event? If you can't clearly answer a why, like why does this need to exist, then maybe question whether you should do that event or not. And yeah, once you have clarity on why, just think about how to communicate it succinctly. I'm happy to connect one-on-one to follow up on that question. I love it. Thank you.
Wow, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. Thank you for a wonderful presentation today. All right, do you have any closing remark?
I definitely want to get to a couple more questions if we can. So let me, because I want to honor the fact that people have written out so many. Let's see what else is in here. Are there any others that jump out at you, or?
Okay. Sean, I don't know if I pronounced that right. Pardon me, Sean.
Hi, Sam. Good afternoon. So my name is Sean. I'm from India, down south in a state called Kerala. And so I'm working on creating a food bank in our city, which we plan to take forward to the whole state. And my question was regarding funding, because we all are involved in various social causes, so we don't get any profit from this. So when we ask funding from external agencies, how do we create that wow factor? How do we So one way I saw personally was trying to get them involved, not just in financially, but in other ways. But again, what are the important points would you like to tell us for this particular issue on getting funding?
Yep. Sean, it's a great question. Part of this is, and I just put a couple of examples in the chat box, whether it's Pollination Project, Resolution Project, Echoing Green, Draper Richards Kaplan, Peace First. I could go on and on. There are a lot of funders that are actually looking to fund young leaders. They are very hard to find. They do not make themselves easy to find, but they do exist. I've tried my best in the last few days to start featuring. Some of you may have seen Schmidt Futures is doing their Reimagine Challenge. They're literally going to give away, I mean, this is unbelievable. They're going to give intuition up to $25,000 per winner US, plus $25,000 to your university, which I bet if you were really creative, you could convince the university to give to your project, or part of that to your project. Like, that is just money sitting out there that, to me, I would jump on those opportunities. So that's one thing I just want to note is seek out those, use things like Opportunity Desk and different platforms. And we'll obviously use our private Facebook community to share a lot of these opportunities. But it's called Schmidt Futures. If you go in the private Facebook group, I featured it in there a couple days ago. But take the time, take a little bit of time, throw an essay together. You never know where it's going to go. How do you position yourself? I'd say be authentic. Really get down to the granular of why do you do what you do? What is driving you? What's beautiful and really exciting to me about you as Millennium Fellows is you're leading grassroots projects. You clearly have conviction because you're going beyond just the traditional classroom experience to say, how do I apply what I'm learning in the classroom and in life in community? So, speak to that. Speak to not only the work you're doing, but why are you doing what you're doing? The way that I describe myself, my North Star, is helping young people own your voice and your power to make a difference. And the fact that I can summarize everything that I've done in 34 years, and especially in the last 15 years, into helping young people own your voice and power to make a difference, you understand right away who I am, what I believe in. And so I would just offer that, how would you summarize your own story in a sentence, your passion in a sentence? But it's a great question. I think I would look to players like Echoing Green and others if you want to see how kind of early stage social entrepreneurs, and I put it in the chat box, look at who's been getting funding from them, because those are kind of like early stages, early stage orgs that get their first, usually I think it's like 60 to 90K from Echoing Green and then scale. But I'm happy to follow up one-on-one, Sean. It's a great question. Why don't we try and get one more question in, to Matteo, if there's one more that jumps out to you.
Okay, I think we have Bidu.
Good evening, Sam. Oh, actually, it's evening here, so the confusion. Hi. First up, this is by far the best webinar I've ever attended, because never have I ever connected. I have felt so connected. So yeah, thank you so much for this webinar. And the question that I would ask is, how do we deal with the society mindset resisting change? Because we often see that, you know, where we, where our society, we see people resisting change. And especially, you know, in the present times where there are so many political, religious, and economic differences and divides. So if you could just tip us on that, that would be great.
Definitely. Thank you so much for the question, Timoteo. So let's this will be the last question. And what I'm going to do is I'm putting my contact information in the chat box. I know a lot of you have reached out already in the last couple of weeks, but I'm going to post it like 3 times just so you all have it. You can reach out to me via WhatsApp, via text, or on social. You can follow me at Sam Vaghar, or my email, but I'm overwhelmed with emails. Be sensitive to and keep in mind, it's not just for me, but Noha, Kenny, etc. You know, there's 1,000 of you, there's a couple of us. So it's very hard for us to, like, if we get 50 emails or 150 emails, don't take it personally. Send that second or third follow-up email after a couple of days if you don't hear back. It is not personal. We are here to support you. In terms of this question, I think it's such a powerful question. How do we deal with the societal mindset of resisting change, specifically in present times when people are facing political, religious, and economic divide? I'm not the expert at this. I won't profess to be. What I will offer is, in terms of, you know, resisting change, there's a book that I recommend called The Tipping Point. And in The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about how movements build. And so in The Tipping Point, one of the key lessons was, they said, look, to actually build a movement that affects change, you don't need 100% of the population. I think the stat was actually, based on all their studies, 14%. So if you can get 14% of a community on board, that's enough. You have enough early adopters on board where all of a sudden then you can get people in the middle. And then those late adopters, the people who might be resistant or opposing your position, by the end, they're kind of forced to adopt it or assimilate or join you. They're not going to be the first ones to join you. So first, start with the people who are already committed. So each of you, for so many of you, you're running a Millennium Fellowship project, you're running a student organization or venture. What does it look like to ensure everybody in your community is really committed, is really all in? Take the time to connect with those individuals, create strong ties and trust between even 5 or 10 people. Because if you as 5 or 10 people really understand each other and trust each other and believe in each other and have a shared goal and a timeline and a time horizon and very clear goals and objectives to hit your ultimate goal. Like, if you know, here are my indicators and milestones towards hitting my ultimate goal, here's what we're going to achieve together. Here's clear roles and responsibilities that are accountable. So you're accountable to each other every week. It's not just 40 or 50 people who are all team members, but it's very concrete roles. So you understand who's in charge of what, who's accountable for what. Then I think as you actually build that kind of strength internally, it becomes a lot easier to then actually shape campus culture. You can start to reach out to the people in the middle and say, hey, maybe you're not as involved, but here are small concrete ways to get involved. And then yes, ultimately the people who are resistant, you'll want to bring on board. It's an incomplete answer, but I wanted to at least give you a piece of it, but I'm happy to follow up one-on-one on it. What I would just say is this: we are infinitely grateful for your leadership, both to you, Bidhu, and everyone who's on this webinar and everyone who's in the Millennium Fellowship. We're so proud that you're Millennium Fellows. And so we really want to learn from you, learn from your experience, and be shaped by it. If there are ways that we can better shape the webinars, the Millennium Fellowship as a whole, to serve you and be in solidarity with you, tell us. Anytime you want, tell us. That feedback is how we get better. And I would encourage you, I know everyone's busy, but attend as many of the webinars as resonate with you. There are some incredible ones like Rakesh Rajani. I think it's October 1st or 2nd. I think October 2nd. Rakesh Rajani was a VP at the Ford Foundation, was a civil society leader in Tanzania, is now helping to run Co-Impact, which gives away grants of $10 to $25 million per grant. You would never know that just reading the bio. So if you're ever wondering, well, is this even worth my time? Google the person. like read up on them, and you will find that we've intentionally designed this. Every person that we're picking to put in front of you is because they're doing extraordinary work, or they're leading with humility, empathy, and inclusion as guiding values, and or they're just going to be accessible. They don't just want to be here for you for a one-time conversation, but really for the rest of your trajectory as fellows and beyond. So I just want to close by saying thank you to each of you. Temitayo, thank you for curating this. The reason why Temitayo is curating this is because he reached out to me and he was like, can I do it? And I was like, that's beautiful. That's amazing. Like, always ask for what you want. Never be afraid to talk to anyone. I know sometimes we all are, but have the courage to keep pushing through when you can, where you can. Ask, how can I help you? Because more often than not, there's so much you can offer. And know what you want out of every meeting to the best of your ability. And really just have the courage of your convictions as often as you can. Thank you so much, everyone. We will catch up again soon. Looking forward to the road ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing with us your journey. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. So guys, we would be anticipating for our next webinar. So I hope you will join us next in the next webinar. Of course, I know we've learned one or two things. For me, I'm really inspired and motivated, to follow the course of the SDG and to reach out to people and share alongside people who are passionate about the social development goals. All right, we have come to the end of today's webinar. I hope you join in the next coming days the webinar. All right, you have a wonderful time. Bye-bye.